Welcome on into the channel, folks. This is Spruce and Studs, and you may be wondering what the impetus for this particular video is or was. So a little while ago, I decided to buy a re-released version of the Space Wolves Blade Guard Veterans, and I wanted to compare it with the original one, and I was actually quite shocked about there was a size difference between them. So now that Ragnar has been re-released rather recently, I decided to do another side-by-side comparison to see if there is any difference whatsoever between the original Ragnar versus the re-released one. So there's nothing to do but jump into the video. I know this looks very horrible right now, but don't worry, we are doing this for science, and that which has been pulled apart can be put back together again. Let's start off with Ragnar's face. So on my left hand side is going to be the OG Ragnar, and then on the right hand side is going to be the newly released, well, more like newly re-released one. The top knot of the new one has a little bit more character in the form of highlights right here than the old one. The top knot binding is more red on this old one versus the new one. Otherwise, the head area is predominantly identical. The wolf's pelt construction is pretty much a mirror image from each other. It's strange that the saturation on the old one is a bit more bold, a little bit more robust than the new one, especially in the dark fur areas in the middle. However, it is the opposite case with this left pauldron right here. The construction is the same, but the new one on my right hand side has a deeper bronze richness than the older one. And if I turn this around, there's a very noticeable difference in that the inside of the left pauldron on the old one is black versus the new one, which is completely bronze. So the way that the pauldrons are attached to the arms of Ragnar are identical with these plastic loops. Now with the arms, I can say that there is no noticeable differences in terms of cosmetic that can be observed. However, eagle-eyed investigators will see that the shoulder peg is visibly shorter on this old one versus this new one, and I will place them on top of each other side by side, so you can kind of tell that this area here is a little bit shorter. So I have to say that the hands on the new one, it feels like they have arthritis because the fingers are really hard to move around. It seems like the new Ragnar is based off of version 2 because history tells us that version 2 hands are very stiff. I find it odd that JoyToy would not use the modern version 3 hands. There's also another way that you can tell that these hands are version 2 in that this heavy bolt pistol does not fit well in Ragnar's hands compared to the version 3, and I will demonstrate to you. So while the index finger is able to wrap around the trigger of the heavy bolt pistol, I would have to say that the rest of the fingers cannot wrap around comfortably. So with the torso area, I would have to say that there are no appreciable differences that can be observed. The socket joints are completely the same, no changes there. All right, with the chest area, it is the same patterning of these gunmetal chains here. The ball joints are the same size and are plastic when attaching the chest to the torso region. But I do want to highlight one major difference is that this area right here in which the arms fit into the chest has more mobility on the new one than the old one. I think you can tell from here that the old one has less mobility because you are not able to swing this particular hinge forward that much, whereas you are able to swing this particular hinge on the new one a lot better than the old one. In terms of how the torso piece attaches to the legs, both Ragnars use this same T-shaped ball joint. Both the amulets that are dangling down on the right shin area are identical with the use of the wolf's teeth and the runes here. And I would have to say the runes that are on the bottom of the legs are more saturated here on the new one, while the old one is much more dull. And then I would have to say that the wolf's tail icon on both Ragnars are highlighted quite prominently and equally. So it would appear also the construction of the double jointed knee area mirror each other perfectly. Now moving on to the feet, again, no appreciable differences. I still love the claw toes that are on the power armor on both Ragnars. And if you look, the ankle ball joint and sockets have no differences either. And now let's take a look at the accessories, starting with Frostfang. You've got the OG one on my left hand side again, and the new one on my right hand side. The length of the chainsword is completely the same, as evidenced by this side-by-side comparison. The lettering also is no different, but there's a slight manufacturer variation, with the new one right here being a little bit more dark and bold, and this is especially noticeable on this other side right here. The pommel on the new one has a black ring versus the old one, this ring is non-existent. And then the end of the pommel on the new one has a little bit more yellowish tinge. Now with the heavy bolt pistol is pretty much the same in terms of construction. I'll have to say that there's a slight manufacturing variation, with the darker gunmetal one on my left hand side versus the new one is a lot lighter looking. Now with the backpacks have 100% the same construction with no appreciable differences. However, the wolf head vents have a subtle variation in color. The new one seems to have a deeper kind of saturation in bronze color versus this old one. The recesses of the eyes, ears, and teeth have more pronounced shading in the old one versus this new one right here. So with regards to the cape, the necklace on the back of the cape is the same in terms of how they look. However, this dark middle section of the cape on the new one is longer and wider and even darker than the old one. I'm going to attribute this to manufacturing variation. There seems to be a lot less light areas, especially on the fringes on the new one versus the old one. Also, the red fringe at the bottom of the new cape is more saturated in color and darker than the old one, which matches this already established trend. However, I would have to say the recesses are a rich, more luxurious dark maroon color on the new one versus the old one. And I believe that the shading patterning is different on both of them once you look at them side by side from each other. And now we will assemble these Ragnars back together to see if there's any size differences. So the question is, are the Ragnars the same size? And obviously, as you can see over here, thankfully they are actually the same size. For better or for worse, has not been upscaled compared to the original one right here. And now I will compare the size of these Ragnars to a few Space Wolves that have been released. First is going to be the V1 Blade Guard Veteran, and as you can see here, the Blade Guard Veteran is a little bit shorter than the Ragnar. The next specimen, however, is going to be the re-released Blade Guard Veteran, and I'm going to put him on the other side of Ragnar. And as you can see here, the Space Marine on the right hand side is exactly the same size as Ragnar, so there is no size difference over here. All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed this side-by-side comparison of the Ragnars. Let me wrap this one up with my final thoughts. All right, members of the chapter, what conclusions can we draw from this particular video? Well, we can honestly say that these Ragnars are 100% exactly the same in terms of their construction. It's not like the re-released one right here was increased in size versus the OG one, so at least that there's some continuity across the board. The only real difference is just slight manufacturing differences in terms of just the coloring, shading, and as well as the saturation, and that's pretty much it. I'm glad that that is really the only difference between these two Ragnars over here. And if you are interested in purchasing a Ragnar for yourself, click in the link in the description below, or you will be brought to David Toys, where I get all of my Ragnars and my action figures. And before you check out, do not forget to use the code SNS to receive 12% off of your purchase and to keep more money in your wallet. And so folks, I want to thank you so much for watching these videos. We have just surpassed 1 million views on the channel, which means that I am doing my job as a content creator, but you also are doing your job in helping the channel grow with all the views, with all the comments, with the likes. It is absolutely fantastic, the support that you've been giving this channel, and without you all, I would not be sitting here in front of you. So thank you so much, and I'll see you all in the next one.